Hello Year 10, this is Miss Brooks. This will be a short screencast helping you to prepare for the Year 10 exam, which will take place next Wednesday, the 15th of November at 11 a.m. Now, the exam is occurring at this time because some students will have a fast tracking exam before or after in the afternoon. So just be wary of that. If you're a fast tracker, check the exam timetable and you'll be able to see whether that applies to you or not. If you are not doing a fast track exam, either in the morning or the afternoon, you will have time to study in class, and I would encourage you to use that to do some revision on quotes and a few other little bits and pieces. But this screencast is going to go through how you could attack the exam when you're in the exam room, and possibly some ways to unpack the section B text that we've included here. So you will walk into the exam and there'll be a task book like this one on your table. It will look exactly like this because this is the same cover page we used. This one is obviously just your practice paper, and the questions will be somewhat different on the final exam. The structure of the booklet: you need to write in blue or black pen in the exam, no pencils please. You may bring any of these items in. I would especially encourage you to bring a dictionary. There are sometimes words or phrases that will pop up in the prompt or in the text that's in section B that you are unfamiliar with or not sure of, and it would be very helpful if you've got an English dictionary there to help you check the meaning of that. So bring in yours if you've got it at home, grab it out of your locker. Get one off mum and dad or borrow one from a sibling or a friend, but you need one on the day, okay? Do not come in without it. You cannot bring in paper or whiteout. Just put 2 lines through it if you've made a mistake and then start writing again. It's not a big deal. You just need to draw a line through it and keep going. And no calculator. This task book is 6 pages. You'll also be provided with blank paper to write on from us. You need to put your name on the front cover of this booklet when writing time starts, and then number and name each page as you write, and then insert them into the booklet at the very end of the exam. Now, obviously you'll see you get 15 minutes reading time and 2 hours writing time. In the 15 minutes, you're not allowed to use a pen or highlighters. You are able to use your dictionary, but that's all. Other than that, you should be reading this exam paper and deciding how you're going to tackle the questions. So the first thing I would do in the first 5 minutes of reading time is I would open up to page 2 and I would look at the 2 prompts for Macbeth, and I would decide which one I wanted to write on and what my 3 paragraph ideas would be. So for example, prompt 1 says, whose ambition is the driving force of the play? Lady Macbeth's, or both? Discuss. Now there are 3 kind of alternative ways to tackle this. The first one you might say is that, I'll write them over here so we can reference them later. You might say it's Macbeth, who has always had a deep desire to be king, which the witch's prophecy sheds a light on. So your overall contention for this one, which would mean your overall argument, is that it is Macbeth's ambition that is the driving force. And then you could argue that he is the one to kill King Duncan. So despite some hesitation or reservations, his ambition leads him to commit multiple murders for his own selfish pursuit of power. The third one might be something about the failure of that. Ultimately, though, Macbeth's ambition fails, or something about isn't enough for him. Macbeth's ambition, something fails him, and he falls victim to the sword of a man who something about not woman born, man of not woman born. So something along those lines. Sorry, I'm not a little bit more accurate. It's a bit late at night and I shouldn't be doing this now. Anyway, for the another alternative might be that you might say Lady Macbeth's ambition is the driving force, and then you would need to do 1, 2, 3 paragraphs about why you think that is, and you might talk about the her immediate reaction to the letter from Macbeth, and takes control from that moment, you know. And then you could say manipulation of his manhood for her own gains. She LM becomes the victim of her own ambition as her interference with nature through the act of regicide, which is killing King Duncan, results in her spiral into insanity. Yeah. Okay. And another contention could be something like initially LM Lady, oh goodness me. Lady Macbeth's ambition is the driving force of the play, propelling the tragic fall of the once heroic Macbeth. However, when LM falters, it is Macbeth's own selfish desires which continue to, let's look for an alternative to propel, to spur him on. That's a good one. Spur him on to corrupting power, something like that. And you could do a paragraph on Lady Macbeth in the start. You could do a paragraph on Macbeth. So one, Lady Macbeth in the opening, kind of challenging manhood, etc., and the way she's pushing him forward. Then you could have Macbeth pushing himself and his kind of, I want to say something like he's misled by the witches and believes he is untouchable, and they use language to manipulate him, but ultimately both fail, and tragic ending. Something like that. Obviously that's not very sophisticated wording, but they're just 3 ideas to get you going. The second question, in what ways is the concept of manhood shaped and challenged in Shakespeare's play Macbeth, really links to that prompt we were looking at about the idea of the 11th century woman and what it means to be a woman, because you can contrast that against what it means to be a man. And so you would set up your paragraphs about how manhood is seen as this kind of desirable quality in which you can do evil and achieve what you need, by Lady Macbeth, who decides to, she says, unsex me here, and she wants to be filled toe to top full with the direst cruelty. She thinks it is her femininity that will hold her back and make her unable to achieve the things that she wants for herself. That is the power of being the Queen of Scotland. Okay, and then you might do your second one about this idea that she uses Macbeth's manhood against him and says that it is only if he durst do it that he would be a man. And when she says durst do it, she's referring to the killing of King Duncan, whom Macbeth has reservations about killing because he is his kinsman and his friend. And King Duncan is there in double trust, and it would be therefore an enormous betrayal to kill him. And then you might conclude with Macbeth becoming so corrupt in his power and thinking that he's untouchable as a man, that he cannot be killed by a man of woman born, that he is deceived and led ultimately to his death because he is so obsessed with what he thinks, how powerful he thinks he is, when in reality he has been somewhat deceived by the witches through their clever use of language. Okay, that's a couple of ideas to get you going. But that was a fair bit of thinking and talking there. And obviously I've unpacked 4 different essay types there. You would just be focusing on unpacking one and doing one small plan in your head. Then what you would do with the remaining 10 minutes is you would move to section B. Now, section B is what we covered in term 3, and that is analysis of argument and persuasive language. And you will get a task that looks like this, and it says, how is written and visual language? So visual language can be pictures, it can be cartoons, it can be diagrams, it can be any other kind of visual form, and it can also be language that has like vivid imagery, so metaphors and similes and things like that. So how is written and visual language used to attempt to persuade the audience to share the point of view of the speaker? And you are looking to unpack, in the same way that we did earlier in the term, how the author tries to persuade you and how they're organising their arguments in a persuasive manner. So this text is about solarium bans, and it's from 2014. It says, in 2012, Victorian Premier Ted Baillieu announced his intention to ban solariums from 31st of December 2014. New South Wales and South Australia have already made the decision to ban solariums from the same year. So we would be lining up with them. The editorial on pages 4 and 5 appeared in both the print and online versions of the newspaper. So the first thing you need to know is an editorial is written by the staff that work on the newspaper's editorial team, and that means they're the people that kind of check over all the pieces of work and are in charge of what stories are published, etc. And when the editorial team write a piece, that means they're speaking on behalf of the whole newspaper. So it's usually quite a topical issue, maybe one that's being debated by government, and it's the paper coming out and having a stance on it. And usually they're trying to persuade people in the public to side with them, but sometimes it can just be about them communicating where they stand on the issue so it is clear. So what you will need to do is obviously read through that text, and you want to be looking for a range of techniques that are being used, but looking for techniques comes secondary to identifying what are 3 arguments that the author is making. Now, I'm going to share a link with you for this document that unpacks this so you can have a look at it, but I would encourage you, before you look at that document, to have a go yourself, because I think it wouldn't be very helpful for you to just look at the answers. You need to have a go yourself and see what you can pull out and test where you're at, and then you can go to this document for a bit of help and further guidance. So in your reading time, you're reading this. You read the background information first. Do not miss out on this. You read it over once. You maybe read it over twice, depending how fast of a reader you are, and you decide, right, what is the author arguing? What's their main contention? If you could sum it up in one sentence, what would it be? And then secondary to that, what are 3 different arguments that the author is making to support their broader contention? And you might also think about, so you've decided, right, they're arguing this, they're arguing that, and they're arguing this third thing. You might also think about the elements of coast and how you're going to write your introduction, because when you pick up your pen, you can start writing that straight away if you think you're ready. But the first thing I would do so once your 15 minutes is up, you know which prompt you're going to write on for Macbeth, you've decided on your 3 paragraph ideas, you've read this piece once, maybe twice, and you know what the arguments are. I would do some very brief annotations off the side to identify, say, this area's argument 1, and I might highlight, I'm going to talk about statistics, I'm going to talk about the age group of the statistics that they've used and what effect that's going to have on the intended audience. I'm going to talk about some emotive language, right, and that's going to be my first argument. Then in here, I'm going to talk about some expert opinion. I'm going to talk about some repetition and some listing. And then I might move to this last part, and I'm going to talk about this lady, Claire Oliver, and I'm going to talk about the image. Okay, and this kind of rhetorical question, a tan to die for, and how it's challenging the reader. So I might go, right, that's argument 1, those things, those are argument 2, they're argument 3. And then I'm going to launch straight into my introduction. So for this piece, you need to start with the orientation. So the Victorian government has made the decision to follow the lead of governments in New South Wales and South Australia and will ban solariums from the 31st of December 2014. Whilst this is welcome news for some parties, proponents, that means supporters of the tanning equipment, are concerned about the impact this will have on the industry and their ability to be fashionable. The editorial, which is the form it's written in, staff at the Bugle, again publication information, argued that the decision of the Baillieu government should be applauded. They see this ban as a true victory for compassion and good sense. So I've outlined what the issue is. I've said that there are 2 sides and what the 2 sides are, and then I've clearly stated where my article sits in that discussion. And it's an editorial by the Bugle, and they are arguing that this is a good choice and they should be banned. In a calm and measured tone, the editorial appeals to not only those young women who make use of the solariums and those in the industry, but also those who agree that this is an important step in the fight against melanoma. So I've been really specific. Young women who make use of solariums, that's one audience. Those in the industry is a second audience. And finally, those who support the fight against melanoma through the banning of these tanning salons. That's my third audience. Now, you obviously don't need to pick out 3. You can pick out 1 or 2. It's totally up to you. But as long as you can talk about them well throughout your piece, then that will be great. Now, on this document, you will see I've identified the argument and unpacked some how and why here. Well, actually, I'll rephrase that. This is what my Year 11 class did earlier in the year, so I'm just sharing that with you. So this is obviously not word perfect. You would need to edit it yourself. And as you can see here, and I highlighted the word use for that reason, is you cannot keep saying the use of statistics, the use of large, the use of anecdote, because it gets very boring and it's not very sophisticated writing. So instead, I've put down the bottom here, alternatives. You could say, the author includes, the author employs, the author makes use of. Any of those will work. Or, better yet, just name the technique and start analysing it. So, the evidence from the University of Sydney, the repetition of emotive terms, the statistics specifically target readers in the age group who. So those are all ways that you can just get straight into your analysis. Now remember, you are using the what, how, and why structure. That means what is the argument, how is that argument being made, and you're going to cite a technique and an example of it. So that means repetition and then quote what's repeated, or expert opinion, then quote the expert. And then you're going to analyze why it's being used and how it contributes to the argument that you've identified. So, for example, in this piece, they've used statistics about, it says the rate of melanoma is 87% higher in people who use a solarium before the age of 35. I believe, therefore, that this author is targeting people who are below the age of 35 that have been or are using solariums to gain a tan. And so I think not only is that 87% higher an enormous statistic that's quite scary, it's specifically regarding the target audience, and therefore it's more effective because these women will be able to see themselves in that figure. All right, so that's how I'd unpack the why. So you can have a look through this. I'll make this available, of course, on the classrooms, and have a go at writing a response to that. And I would suggest writing a full response for section B between now and the exam, and possibly asking your teacher to have a look over it. And I would be planning in detail a response to Macbeth at the very least, if not having a go at writing a full response. But I would definitely be practicing my quotes and some other things like that between now and next Wednesday. All right, I'm at 21 minutes. I'm going to leave it there. If you've got any questions or concerns, please feel free to come and see myself, Mrs. Brown, Miss Trotman, or Miss Stevenson, and we are more than happy to help you. We will be available at Homework Club this week, but otherwise you can find us at lunchtime or in class, and we'll be more than happy to provide you with some assistance. Good luck!